Hellfire Jack, The Life and Legacy of Major General Sir John George Dartnell. Episode 4, The Miraculous Stand at Rorke's Drift. A fresh army of Zulu warriors that had missed the fighting at Isandlwana were still thirsting for blood when they disobeyed their Zulu king's order to not cross the Buffalo River into British territory. But 4,000 Zulu warriors crossed the Buffalo River anyway to attack the Army base supply camp at Rorke's Drift. The defense of the mission station of Rorke's Drift was under the command of Lieutenant John Chard of the Royal Engineers, the same Lieutenant Chard that had just returned from Isandlwana before his regiment was massacred there, and also under the leadership of Lieutenant Gonville Bromhead. Lieutenant Chard hastily ordered preparations for a defensive stand at Rorke's Drift, while Bromhead ordered mealie bags, that's gunny sacks full of dried corn, and biscuit boxes to be taken from the store and used in the fortifications. B Company's tents were then struck, and the water cart was filled and dragged into the yard between the two buildings. 2 wagons were also pulled into the defenses connecting the two buildings. Injured patients who were still able to bear arms were posted at firing positions in the makeshift hospital. The horrifying sound of thousands of Zulu warriors' tramping feet was heard as they descended from Isandlwana for the deadly attack on Rorke's Drift. These Zulus were under the command of Ketsueo's brother, Prince Dabulamanzi Kamapandi, who rode on a white horse. When the frightened black natives of the Natal native contingent stationed at Rorke's Drift saw the Zulu army, they fled along with their white officers, leaving Chard with around 100 able-bodied men. This meant that the original perimeter was far too extended, so Chard hastily had a new barricade of biscuit boxes built from the corner of the storehouse to the front wall. The Zulu attack was launched at around 4:30 p.m., with shots being fired from the Zulu warriors occupying the Shiyane terraces behind the post. The inaccurate Zulu fire was directed at the British defenders, while the British responded with accurate and well-controlled volleys. Several elements of the Zulu force charged toward the front of the hospital, but Prince Dabulamanzi dismounted and encouraged his warriors to attack in masses rather than in small groups. Snipers from the terraces also joined the attack, and eventually sniping from the terraces began to take its toll. The battle at Rorke's Drift was a bitter one. The Zulus ran straight for the hospital and swarmed on the veranda. It was a favorite method of Zulus to burn any building they attack. They set fire to the hospital's thatched roof and came inside to kill the sick and wounded. The soldiers barricaded the doors as firmly as possible and then knocked holes in the walls to pass the sick men through to the adjacent storeroom. Most of the soldiers made it out before the hospital collapsed. One invalid was burnt to death. Other soldiers were carried by the Zulus over a ridge out of range of British bullets and were dreadfully mutilated. When Zulus reached the last room in the hospital, nearly all the invalids had been removed, and the British made a mad dash to a better position a few yards away. At about 6 p.m., Chard decided to consolidate his position, which necessitated abandoning the hospital. The Zulus launched waves of renewed fierce attacks, crashing into the defenses. The defenders' rifle fire was so intense that their gun barrels glowed red hot. Chard ordered a redoubt, that's a fortress wall, built of gunny sacks filled with dried corn to be built in front of the store to be used as a final stand. Snipers from the terraces again joined the attack, and the Zulus occupied the stone kraal on the east side of the perimeter. Fierce hand-to-hand fighting continued until around midnight, when the Zulu attack began to slacken due to sheer exhaustion. Firing finally ceased at around 4 a.m. the following day. At dawn, the defenders gazed at the carnage that surrounded them. The weary defenders prepared to face a renewed onslaught, only to witness the warriors rising up and moving back down to the Buffalo River, where they crossed back into Zululand, within a few hundred meters of Lord Chelmsford, who was just returning with the remainder of his central column that had left Isandlwana shortly before dawn. Figures were seen moving about, and as the hospital had been burnt down, it was feared there had been another disaster. At last, one of the soldiers sprang onto the wall, signifying that the garrison had held the station. The column under Lord Chelmsford became so excited that ranks were broken as Chelmsford's men rushed up the slopes to Rorke's Drift to congratulate the survivors. Trooper Harry Lugg was a Natal Mounted Police officer that was sick and had been left in the hospital at Rorke's Drift. He was heavily engaged fighting the Zulus during the attacks there. He said, "The column came to our relief about 5:30 in the morning, and real British cheers went up, I can tell you. When Major Dartnell saw me, he said, 'I never thought of seeing you alive again, my boy.' The tears were standing in his eyes. He said, 'We saw the fire last night and thought you were all murdered. Thank God it is not so.'" The Natal Mounted Police who were there were Trooper Hunter, who was killed, Trooper Green, who was slightly wounded, and Trooper Harry Lugg, mentioned above, who afterwards became Lieutenant Colonel and Magistrate at Umusinga. All three had been left in the hospital when their comrades moved off to Isandlwana, but they were able to take a very active part in the defense. When the column to which the Natal Mounted Police were attached arrived, they found the bodies of natives lying all around the hospital and store. There were many wounded Zulus, but none recovered, and several who tried to escape were shot. One actually got back across Rorke's Drift, although dozens of shots were fired at him, but he was followed by a mounted infantryman and killed. The dead bodies of 375 Zulus lay near the smoldering ruins of the station. Fatigue parties were employed all day burying them. Aftermath of the Battle of Rorke's Drift showing the breakdown of British and colonial casualties. 15 men killed in battle. 2 wounded men died later, making it a total of 17 men killed. 1st and 24th Foot, 4 killed or mortally wounded in action, 2 wounded. 2nd of 24th Foot, 9 killed or mortally wounded in action, 9 wounded. Natal Mounted Police, 1 killed in action, 1 wounded. Commissariat and Transport Department, 1 killed in action, 1 wounded. 1st of 3rd Natal Native Contingent, 1 killed in action. 2nd of the 3rd Natal Native Contingent, 2 wounded. Also, 1 member of Stevenson's 2nd of 3rd Native Natal Contingent, Corporal William Anderson, was killed by British fire while fleeing the station just prior to the arrival of the Zulus. After the battle at Rorke's Drift, the British awarded 11 Victoria Crosses, England's highest decoration for bravery, to 11 defenders. This still remains the largest number of Victoria Crosses awarded in any single action anywhere in the world. After the battle, 375 enemy bodies were counted, but that did not include more than 100 dead Zulus that were dragged away. It has been estimated that at least 500 wounded and captured warriors might have been killed as well. Having witnessed the carnage at Isandlwana, the members of Chelmsford Relief Force had no mercy for any captured or wounded Zulus they came across, nor did the station's defenders. Trooper William James Clark of the Natal Mounted Police described in his diary that altogether we buried 375 Zulus and some wounded were thrown into the grave. Seeing the manner in which our wounded had been mutilated after being dragged from the hospital, we were very bitter and did not spare any wounded Zulus. Samuel Pitt, who served as a private in B Company during the battle, told the Western Mail in 1914 that the official enemy death toll was too low. "We reckon we had accounted for 875, but the books will tell you 400 or 500. Lieutenant Horace Smith Dorian, a member of Chelmsford's staff, wrote that the day after the battle an improvised gallows was used for hanging Zulus who were supposed to have behaved treacherously. In the end, King Ketsueo's overwhelming success at Isandlwana had in fact secured his ultimate downfall because the British government was determined to avenge the defeat of Her Royal Majesty's army, and the British government dispatched overwhelming military reinforcements to the colony of Natal to recover their honor. On the arrival of reinforcements from England, a company of the 24th Regiment was left to garrison Helpmaker, and the Natal Mounted Police were ordered to join the column under General Newdigate at Dundee, arriving there on the 18th of April. There was great disappointment when the news came that the Natal Mounted Police were not to join the column that was to advance on Ulundi, where Ketsuo's great army of over 20,000 warriors was defeated on the open plain by a force of about 5,000 British soldiers. On relinquishing his command of the cavalry column, Lieutenant Colonel Russell wrote to Major Dartnell, quote, "As the Natal Mounted Police have now passed from under my command, and I may not come across them officially again, I wish to thank them all for the cordial manner in which they have supported me in every way and on every occasion since the beginning of the campaign. I most sincerely wish you all, individually and as a corps, every good fortune in the future." Close quote. The ranks of the police having been considerably thinned by sickness and fighting, the arrival of 60 recruits from England on the 1st of June was opportune. 40 more men joined from the colony of Natal, and this brought the Natal Mounted Police Corps up to its full strength once more. As quickly as possible, a score of these troopers were fitted out, drilled, and sent up to Helpmaker, where the men were chafing badly under the monotony of inaction other than routine work. Prince Louis Napoleon, grandson of Napoleon Bonaparte, who joined the headquarters staff of Lord Chelmsford, met his death a few miles from Nkudu. He was with a small force when 50 Zulus made a sudden rush. On this occasion the prince's horse became frightened by the sudden rush and pranced in such a manner that he was unable to mount it. The saddle's holster partly gave way, and he fell and was trodden by the excited animal. The prince was dismounted, and his horse, which was 16 hands high, had always been difficult to mount. He was now alone with a dozen warriors close upon him, but he regained his feet, and with revolver in hand, faced the blacks and death. The fight was hopeless, and the prince died as he had lived, a brave soldier. After the prince's body was recovered, the Natal Mounted Police were ordered to furnish an escort for it to Durban, the coffin being taken by road and placed on a warship which took it back to England. The bodies of those who were killed at Isandlwana having lain where they fell for 5 months, a force was sent out towards the end of June to perform the sad task of burial. It was joined at Rorke's Drift by 60 of the Natal Mounted Police under Major Dartnell. Nature had softened the scene when they arrived. The dead were there, but in nearly every case their bleached bones were hidden by the grass and corn that had grown up everywhere. It was a heartbreaking task, but all the bodies of the Natal Mounted Police were identified and buried, their names being written in pencil on wood or a stone near them. The only victims left untouched were those of the 24th Regiment. These were not moved at the expressed desire of Colonel Glynn and other officers who hoped to be able to inter them themselves at a later date. This is the end of Episode 4. Please proceed to Episode 5, The Boer Wars.